Hey fellow gardeners, Dawn here from Seasonal Designs. I garden in Wisconsin Zone 5. Now today's video is a recap of things that we did in the garden in 2024. Some of these things you guys maybe have seen if you follow me here on YouTube. Other things you may not have seen or maybe you don't remember. So we are going to take a look back at different videos and photos of all the things and the way the gardens looked last year. Now, in all honesty, I had every intention of getting this up much sooner than now, but I didn't. So it's still January, and I still think we can get away with looking back at a recap. Well, let's start the year off in January when we received over 1.5 feet of very heavy, very wet snow. And while it was gorgeous, it did a lot of damage to pine trees and bushes. And right here, it literally broke the top off of both of our hawthorn trees in the front yard, which are a significant part of the front yard landscaping. It became such a big project in spring. Before we could even tackle like the garden beds, we had a ton of tree damage, bush damage that we needed to clean up. So much so that we did a lot of the cutting and putting it in piles, but we had to hire somebody to come in with a chipper and just get rid of this stuff. There was just way too much for us to even consider burning. It brought down like literally trees, and we just felt so overwhelmed with the cleanup. We did need to get help. The next thing we did was we had our prairie burned, and we do have someone that comes in and does this for us because it is about 6 acres and it is quite a project. You want to make sure you're doing things right. And in years previous, we have burned sections of the prairie, but this year we decided just to get everything burned. Now, what that allows me to see is if you look in here, you can see there's like little sticks and stuff in there. Those are trees or saplings that have seeded themselves in there, things that I really don't want growing in my prairie. And so I was able to get in, cut those out, hit them with stump out in the hopes of just getting rid of those. So after a burn is a great time to take advantage of doing something like that. Now, the burn actually worked in our benefit this year because shortly after we got a burn, we did get a lot of rain. Of course, I was busy. As you guys know, I love to do a lot of seed starting, things that I grow in my vegetable garden, as well as my dahlias, my snapdragons. This year I grew petunias from seed. I just had a ton of stuff in the greenhouse and really started kind of early in 2024, and things really turned out well from a growth perspective. My husband also built me 2 more raised garden beds. We had them filled with a raised garden bed mix, and I was super happy to get these because I feel like I could even use a few more, but I used every square inch of those. 2024 was also the year I did a project with Monrovia. I had a shade garden area that was truly an ugly hot mess. I planned what I wanted, and I worked with Monrovia, and all of these gorgeous plants here are for my shade garden, and I was able to get all of these planted up in early May this year. Here is the part shade area the summer previous to when I planted this up, and it is full of something called bishop's weed. I don't know how it got there. It has always been in this part of my wooded area. I had to work my butt off to get rid of this stuff. And I am keeping my eye on this area because this stuff just keeps popping up over and over again. And when I see it, I just get it right away. So I feel like I have it under pretty good control. This part shade to shade garden was planted up in early May. I think it was the 5th and the 6th. And I was really excited to see how this was going to fill in and how this garden was going to progress. And the good thing about planting this garden, as well as the burn that I mentioned earlier, is that the spring of 2024 was probably the rainiest, wettest spring I can recall. We also had a few of those rainstorms that turned into hail. You can see I have my planters planted up and we're getting this big hailstorm. And the rain was great. The hail I wasn't super excited about because it did do some damage. So my big Sum and Substance hostas were open and gorgeous. And when we got that hail, it damaged every single one of my hostas. The leaves were ripped, and I was so disappointed because those of you who follow me know that 2024 was a big year for me in garden tours. I had 2 events in 2024, and when I saw the damage to my hostas, knowing that there was no way around that, they were going to be damaged for the entire summer, I was a bit disappointed. The other thing that really suffered for me was my salvia. It did not like all of that rain. And then, of course, the other thing that suffered was my poor girl Anna. Every time we went out for a walk, we had to put rain gear on. She's not super happy about rain gear, and neither am I. But I really shouldn't complain about the rain because our lawn in 2024 was probably the lushest, greenest lawn I think we have ever had. Not only the lawn, but most of my plants really did benefit from all of the rain and the wet. Things were taller, things were greener, things were lusher. And really, overall, I would say that it really was quite the amazing year. And I think a lot of it had to do with that great rain. 2024 was also a fantastic year for the lupin in our prairie. There are 2 sections of the prairie that were just covered with this beautiful purple lupin. It was just big, luscious, gorgeous, and healthy. And again, I definitely think that early spring rain had a lot to do with how beautiful it looked this year. Crazy thing is that in about mid-July, we actually found ourselves edging the other way in a drought where we just didn't get any rain, and I found myself having to add supplemental water. You also recall 2024 was the year we had to get rid of our pagoda dogwood, which is that tree up the corner of the patio. It was gorgeous for years. Unfortunately, it got canker and it looked horrible. And in mid-June, actually it was probably the end of June, we had to replace it. So we dug it out, we put in an eastern redbud, and then I simply underplanted it with annuals in the hopes that they would fill in quickly so that it would look good for the upcoming garden tours. Those of you who follow me know that 2024 was a pretty big year for me in terms of garden tours. We opened up our gardens for 2 events. The largest was the Garden Conservancy Open Days. We opened our gardens August 10th and 11th, and almost 700 people toured our gardens those 2 days. The second event was for the Ozaukee County Master Gardeners. It was an evening event, and it was absolutely lovely. Now, the great thing about these is that I got to meet a lot of you, and some of you drove many miles, Appleton, La Crosse, Chicago. Some of you came from out of state, and it was so rewarding for me to share my passion with people who had the same passion. And it was also really great to be able to meet some of you. So if you ever have an opportunity to participate in a garden tour, I highly recommend it. Among all of the work I was doing in my garden, getting things ready so that they look good for the tours, fresh edging and fresh mulching and just making sure everything looked as good as possible, I also had containers to do, not only for myself, but for my clients. And I felt a little overwhelmed because I had both spring and summer to do. And you guys know, even just my own containers, I probably do around 20 to 22 pretty large containers just for my own property, and then to add in client containers. I did feel a little bit overwhelmed, but everything turned out well and I was able to get everything done on time. Well, I also need to mention my dahlias because I heard a lot of people say last year was not a good year for dahlias for them. And last year was an amazing year for dahlias for me. And I think it may have had something to do with the fact that I grew them all in one of my new raised beds with new raised bed mix. These were amazing this past year. And I love having dahlias to use as cut flowers. I use them in bouquets for my home. I use them when I'm having dinner parties in my greenhouse for something along the dining table. I love to use all of this beautiful, beautiful stuff all around my house. And this year I also opened up my cutting gardens to someone who made both boutonnieres and bouquets for homecomings as a fundraiser for something her kids were involved with. So I really love doing that. I'm so happy I had extra, but my dahlias this year were perfection. I'm also going to call 2024 the year of the chipmunk because I have never had so many chipmunks in my yard as I did last year. I think the mild winters and then all the rain that we got, with all the good growth in the vegetation, provided a lot of food for these little guys. The other thing that I had to do last year is I had to rescue a turkey chick as well as a chickadee baby, both of whom got separated from their parents and ended up having to rescue those, taking them to a wildlife center. Of course, I had a ton of our little green tree frogs, which I absolutely love having. I love their little sound at night, and they love hanging out on the greenhouse glass to catch bugs. And I also felt like last year was a good year for butterflies. We had a lot of swallowtails, and I actually had some monarch activity out in the prairie. So I thought all of those things were actually very great. I love everything that nature provides, even these guys, the pesky deer. I mean, look at her. How can you hate her? One of the kind of fun things I did in spring last year is I went to a mushroom workshop that was put on by the Garden Conservancy, and we inoculated logs, and we are growing, chestnut, oyster, and shiitake mushrooms. And I actually got a few of my first mushrooms last year, which was really ahead of schedule, but it was very interesting and a very fun workshop. Some of you might remember the video I did on my hanging arrangements. I did this in early 2024. I wanted something that I could use in my greenhouse for dinner parties or special events or outside under my pergola or hanging from a tree. I worked on these in my basement and then took them out and got them put up in the greenhouse, and they were absolutely beautiful. Interesting thing is I couldn't find any how to create hanging arrangements on YouTube, so I thought this is an opportunity for me. I will do something and get it out there on YouTube in case anybody else should want to create something like this. I love them. I thought they turned out great. Those of you who follow me here on YouTube know that the end of summer is not the end of gardening because we have both fall and winter containers to do. I had videos up for both this year at the end of 2024, and it seems like my container videos in general do incredibly well on YouTube, and I'm really thankful for that. I want to just make sure that if you guys are seeing this video, you give me a follow so that you don't miss some of the fun stuff that is coming in 2025. Even though I said I wasn't going to take on any more new clients, I did take on a new client this year, a home that's really close to one of the businesses that I do already. And a lot of you really loved what we did in front of her property. So I'm really excited to work on this one in spring. That is it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys subscribe, and I hope to see you a lot more in 2025. Bye-bye.